Hello and welcome to Ask an Atheist, a weekly call-in educational program focusing on atheism, skeptical inquiry, and the separation of church and state. My name is Casey Dorn. My co-host this week is the indomitable Mike Gillis.
Indomitable?
Yeah. I don't think anyone can dominate you.
Has yet to be tried.
How's it going, Mike?
It's going pretty good. This is actually our last live broadcast here at the SCANtv studios.
It's very sad to say, and in a kind of a bittersweet melancholia of the dark end of the year, we get to have our final live show goodbye.
Yes. So this is a very special episode of Ask an Atheist. Believe
it's not going to be funny. It's going to be sad.
Sad, like in the Nancy Reagan tells you not to do drugs, child molesting bike shop owner kind of way. This is the anti-smoking commercial.
Yes.
Okay.
Go ahead.
We have a couple of quick announcements. This, right now, is the very first in what will become a segment called Countdown to Backpedaling. As we mentioned a few weeks ago, there is a group called We Can Know, who is a fundamentalist Christian group that's been putting billboards up around the country, including in Texas and in Ohio and Indiana. Well, We Can Know is actually making the claim that the world is ending, and ending on a faster timescale than the Mayans seemed to think it would.
Wow.
They believe, and they're stating this on their billboards, that Jesus will return on May 21st, 2011. And in fact, this is actually the mission statement off the We Can Know website. It says, "This website has been developed by God's grace," which I think must be their operating system, "through the efforts of a small group of believers not affiliated with any organization," though technically they are an organization.
Sure.
"The individuals behind the scenes are of no consequence, so pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. The focus is on the warning that God is sounding to the world through His Word, that He will close the door to salvation on May 21st, 2011, when He returns to take His elect children," which I presume they're going to mean themselves, "to heaven and begin the day of judgment for earth and all those left behind until October 21st, 2011. Then He will destroy the world and all that is therein."
Wow.
So yeah, this is cutting it close here, folks. This means the end of the world is nigh.
Yeah, you know what's, I was just, we'd talked about this before, but you know what's sad about this to me is that it's only a year, it's only a year from, no, it's less
Not
than
even
a
a
year.
year, we're
It's less
talking
than a
5
year.
months.
It's half a year from now, and there are going to be a lot of people, I'll venture to guess, a couple billion people, maybe more than a couple billion people, who don't have the internet or aren't going to know about this before Jesus comes back. So it's pretty sad. If they're trying to spread God's message, why aren't they doing it in a way that hits everyone on the planet instead of just people who live in
Well, that's the same thing with God and salvation, though.
Well.
Why are you gonna? It's like I'm gonna kill a first-century Palestinian Jew to show the entire world this special thing. No, that doesn't really work that way. When you can just send out, you can just basically BCC everyone through their head. So yeah, 153 days remain until the stated end of the world. And now this isn't the first time that somebody like this has made a claim and was stupid enough, or I guess you could say believing enough, because somebody who makes a claim about the end of the world happening within their own lifetime, they have to really believe on some level. They have to really think that this is going to come, and they really mean it, because they're going to be around to be embarrassed for this when it doesn't happen.
That's true.
So this kind of reminds me of Hal Lindsey saying that the world was going to, in 1970, wrote a book called The Late Great Planet Earth, talking about the world ending in the 1980s. And there was another book that came out after that, out of print, by the way, called 88 Reasons Why the Rapture Will Be in 1988. And spoiler alert, it wasn't. Sometimes I really wish there were. I wish that a magical beam would come down and take away all of the Pat Robertsons. And maybe we could get some stuff done. We could just, you know what? Same-sex marriage for everyone.
Yay!
Yay! But yeah, I think it's kind of funny that we do this, but I really have to say this is the countdown to backpedaling. So we're going to keep you updated. 153 days right now till the end of the world.
Set your clocks.
So we're going to
set your Outlook reminder events. So make sure that on the day, the day before, comes up on your desktop on your cubicle, and you'll be like, man, I've got to go to confessional.
Yeah, you got to get that out of the way. I think we're going to keep you updated, because a lot of times people like this rely on the fact that they put up the billboard and now they can just recede to the background. We're not going to let that happen. Every show from now until May 21st, we're going to keep you updated on whether Jesus has come back. And I'm not going to hold my breath, but I don't think you will.
Yeah. Well, now it's funny also when you were thinking about that, posting billboards up that are timely, like the billboard for the opening of I think when I lived in LA, the I Spy remake movie with Eddie Murphy or something, the billboard's were actually up for like 3 years after it had actually been released. There's something about keeping a billboard up after it's timely. And I remember the billboard in Medford, Oregon that had this nice little kind of a cartoony silhouette of a guy in a Pope's hat, and it just said the Pope is the Antichrist. And I was thinking, since that Pope is now dead, John Paul II is dead, does that mean the Antichrist is dead? Or is just like the Antichrist about the institution? So whomever occupies the position of Pope is automatically the Antichrist.
Antichrist, it's part of the job.
Like James Bond.
Like James Bond, like you said, you just pass the
It's going to be 007 no matter who it is.
You just pass it on to a new actor, and they play their own, or Doctor Who. A new Antichrist now.
Right.
And it's like, every time there's a new Antichrist, like, I don't know, I really, that was my Antichrist. He was the one when I was a kid. He was the one I saw on TV when I was a kid. I don't want to watch this new Antichrist.
Adam West was the best Antichrist. Really.
Usually by the second episode, that's when the Antichrist kind of wins me over. Unless there's really bad writing. So anyways, folks, we're going to keep you updated. 153 days remain until the beginning of the end.
We're going to keep you updated 153%.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Even that superfluous 53%. So other than that, we should probably talk a bit about how things are going to move from now on. As you know, we're not going to have a show on SCANtv a few weeks from now. Starting January 2nd, we're going to be starting on KLAY 1180, which is a locally owned radio station out of Lakewood, Washington. 9? As I said, on the 9th of January. So we are actually...
Course correction.
Course correction. I'm going to retroactively say I always had said that. No time did I ever say the 2nd. So January 9th, we're going to be starting a show on KLAY 1180 in Lakewood, and the show's going to continue in exactly the same format. You're going to continue to have podcasts, you're going to continue to have online content, and we're definitely going to be having a video component to that as well. So we want to let you know that we've just had an extremely successful comedy benefit concert. We have enough to pay for the first season, but that doesn't mean we're going to stop taking donations. We want to give ourselves enough leeway that we can create a sustainable donor base, not a donor base, but advertising base to make this show sort of support itself. So please, if you go to our website, www.askanatheist.tv, if we can get that magic DSK graphic up on the screen. Come on.
I don't think you're a Jedi.
You gotta believe. You gotta believe. Here it comes.
You know, if you keep clapping, and the fairy's going to get its wings. Oh, there we go.
Oh, there we go. See, it's a delayed reaction. Yes. I like to think that my prayer loosened it.
Yeah.
So yes, please go to our website and give it a look. And if you feel it, just like they say on NPR, if you like the stuff that we're already giving you for free, please drop us a couple bucks.
We promise not to have what's his name, John Siegel. What's that guy's name? The dude. Never mind.
We promise not to.
No Michelle Norris. There will be no Michelle Norris on our program.
Yeah,
we won't have to suffer through that terrible, terrible name. Michelle Norris. It's Michelle.
I'm just going to let
It's Michelle. Sorry. If you have something to say about my slanderous libel against hosts at NPR, or if you want to talk about atheism, our number is, of course, 206-421-5658. Please call in now because this will be the last time we'll be able to take calls from this number. It'll be a different number next time, of which we'll have the information for you on that. But for now, if you want to talk to us, it's down at the bottom of the screen, I think. Where?
Oh, there it was. You got to believe, man. There we go. There we go.
Oh, so we have got a couple news stories here.
Okay, this one comes from Yahoo News. The Pope. What can you say about this guy, other than he wears that little Mike TV cowboy hat that begs for a pop gun?
You mean Pope Benedict?
I like to think of him as Darth Benedict. Vatican City, it says, Pope calls Christians the most persecuted. This will be good. Pope Benedict XVI said Thursday that Christians suffer more religious persecution than any other group, denouncing lack of freedom of worship as an intolerable threat to world security. Now, I'm going to let that sink in just a little bit. The Pope said that Christians of all religious groups in the entire world had it the worst. He said, at present, Christians are the religious group that suffers the most from persecution on account of its faith, the pontiff asserted, and cited Christian communities suffering from violence and intolerance, particularly in Asia, Africa, the Middle East, and the Holy Land. Benedict didn't cite countries, but in the past years, church officials have lamented that Christians, most of them migrant workers, are forbidden to worship in Saudi Arabia.
Well,
they are, however, they're able to worship. They're just not able to build churches, and that is wrong. You should be able to worship as you see fit. And Saudi Arabia is probably the worst of the Islamic theocracies.
I've got a lot of bad things to say about Saudi Arabia because they are basically a dictatorship, so what can you do?
Yeah, it's a theocratic dictatorship.
Right.
This is the same country that executes people for like witchcraft or an unmarried woman being seen fraternizing with a man she's not married to or related to.
Right.
I mean, this is a barbaric country, and they're not allowed to build churches there. They should be able to. I'd rather they didn't build churches, just the way I'd rather people didn't buy Britney Spears albums. But I will fight for somebody's right to buy a Britney Spears album, though I'd rather they didn't. There's the thing, though. You're allowed to worship. You're just not allowed to have a church or any kind of organization in Saudi Arabia. That's wrong. But atheists in Saudi Arabia, we're not allowed to draw breath.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to play Oppression Olympics with anybody, but I'm sorry, Joey Ratz, you're the one who opened the door on this by saying you had it the worst. So we're going to talk about how bad you have it. There are people, like there's a Palestinian blogger who's in prison right now. He may even be executed simply for saying on Facebook that he's an atheist.
Yeah.
Christians in the Palestinian territories don't get that. I'm sorry, even under Sharia law, you are still a person of the book. You're a second-class citizen, but we are persona non grata. So, get out your little imaginary thing, Mr. I have it so bad even though I have diplomatic and legal immunity and live in a freaking palace.
I think that the way that this statement is allowed to ride is obviously based on people's ignorance and based on the sort of the general type of persecution complex someone has to be a religion and be an adherent to an embattled religion like Catholicism, because they're saying, oh, well, it can't be that all these priests are actually raping people. This is a smear campaign. If you knew a little bit more about the way that about religious societies in the world, you would say that. I mean, I would assume Scientologists are probably more persecuted than Christians. I mean, for a good reason, but yeah.
Well, their religion's actually illegal in a number of countries. Yeah. Even though they are kind of a cult.
But no, I mean, there are some smaller and ancient religious groups, for example, Zoroastrians and especially Manichaeans. Those religious groups were entirely decimated by our wars of adventure in the Middle East. And when the Civil War started ramping up in Iraq, we always have to remind people that Iraq was Mesopotamia, right? It was the cradle of civilization, and so the oldest religious and cultural remnants from that era are coming from basically that land. So Manichaeans and Zoroastrians were executed, assassinated, and dispossessed, incredibly in those 3 or 4 years of intense civil war in Iraq. I would assume that your average Zoroastrian is far more persecuted than your average Christian, with a few exceptions of maybe, someone who might live in, I don't know, what was the church that got, the Christian church that, was it in Baghdad that got bombed, essentially? Yeah, that happens. Christians do just like everyone else, do attacked,
but to say
not
that you
the
have
most
it
persecuted.
The worst isn't even close to the worst, and it just speaks to the sort of privilege that these people have when their standard for persecution often simply means that somebody vocally disagrees with them or simply states, you guys don't have the monopoly on moral behavior. Right. Simple as that. Their version of persecution is, oh my God, the atheists put something on the side of the bus. There are people that are in prisons right now being beaten and tortured, go, God, I'd love to trade for that kind of persecution. Let me get some of that. Let me just be mildly offended at something somebody does. The sort of privilege you guys have, let's just look at it. What would we look as standards for persecution? I mean, really persecute. That would be politically ostracized.
Yeah.
Somebody who has
dispossession would be one. Would be literally being driven out of your homes or being harassed by the police or by militias or
not being allowed to practice your beliefs.
Right.
There are places where that does happen, but to say you have it the worst, the places where Christians have it the worst, atheists have it so much worse than you do.
Right.
But let's just say a political ostracizing, it doesn't really happen that way. Let's just look at the West. They're in the most powerful countries in the world. At best, being a Christian helps you tremendously. At worst, it has no effect. At worst. That's in the countries like that. In this sort of country, when the two leading candidates for president, Barack Obama and John McCain, were running for president, They sat down and kissed Rick Warren's ass.
Yeah. Well, they had the who is the more of a Christian contest. You know?
Yeah, who's more of a Christian contest, while basically vying for the most powerful job in the world. They basically kissed your ass, and politicians continue to kiss your ass all the time. The same sort of thing. Are you silenced? Certainly not with your menagerie of radio stations, TV stations, countless publishers printing exclusively Christian materials.
I was actually I was reading, very seldom do I actually end up reading the Times, the editorial section of the Times, but they had a guy who is there's more than one dude who does this, the sort of like the faith column and stuff. I was going to say, at no point can you say that their views are marginalized when basically the guy with no credentials other than, this is something that Hitchens says all the time, is why does having Reverend in front of your name give you any sort of stance or prominence in society at all? What value does it serve other than the fact that you're just recognized by a group of people for your belief and your ability to talk about it? Like, they're not persecuted. In fact, they're up there. Their column is right next to the smartest and most respected people in at least our local community. So
Absolutely.
That's not persecuted at all. They're being given equal weight.
And I've heard this too, and Sam has said that even times that he's worn that priest collar thing on Halloween and other times, people totally change their behavior towards you. They'll let you cut in line, they'll treat you better. That you are not persecuted. Oh my God, I would love to trade with you sometimes. The fact that your belief system is treated as the default, both politically, both culturally, the fact that you have to share with other people doesn't mean you're getting picked on. Period. You're basically, there's no war against you. There's a war against dominance. We want to live in a secular society where nobody has that leg up or the right to kick anyone around based on this sort of stuff. Period. You are not picked upon. Stop being such a whiny little baby.
And if you take offense at that, you think you are being persecuted, 206-421-5658. Tell us in what ways you're persecuted, because we can't think of any.
I can't. Seriously. I mean, that's the thing is that let's look at the halls of power. I mean, if you're really as badly persecuted as you are, there should be no Christian heads of state. I mean,
true.
I can think of one atheist congressman. That's Pete Stark in California. But his atheism was only outed years. I think he's like in their 8 terms now.
Wow.
It really doesn't affect him. He's an entrenched. There's really very little you can do a lot of times to get thrown out as a congressman.
Right.
But it's one of those things. But look how many people are Christian, or at least self-described Christian.
Sure.
Nearly all of them. In fact, it doesn't hurt you anywhere in the country to mention that you're Christian.
No.
Even in the most liberal, secular areas that you think are picking on you or going after you, none of these areas is it political suicide to announce that you believe in God or Jesus Christ. Nowhere.
Right.
In the most powerful country in the world. In fact, not doing that usually means somebody's going to go after you. I mean, even being the wrong kind of Christian, one that's less mainstream. That's the only way you can be picked on for being a Christian, is being a Mormon or something.
Right.
But
even then, you can run for president.
Even then, you can run for president, and most people just let it go.
Right. Well, we've certainly beat that dead horse. Dead and deader. So we've got actually my future brother-in-law gave me this from New York Times that he was reading, and this is one of those ones on its face you think, oh, well, those atheists who have an agenda, of course they would never acknowledge a story about where there's reverse discrimination, where instead it's Christians being discriminated against for their beliefs. This news article, and this was just a couple days ago in the New York Times, astronomer sues University of Kentucky, claiming his faith cost him a job. In 2007, C. Martin Gaskell, an astronomer at the University of Nebraska, was the leading candidate for a job running an observatory at the University of Kentucky. But then somebody did what one does nowadays, which is do an internet search. That search turned up evidence of Dr. Gaskell's evangelical Christian faith. The University of Kentucky hired someone else, and Dr. Gaskell sued that institution. Whether his faith cost him the job, and whether certain religious beliefs may legally render a people unfit for certain jobs, are among the questions raised by the case Gaskell versus University of Kentucky. So this is now a legal precedent of whether or not it's discrimination. In late November, a federal judge in Kentucky ruled that the case could go forward, and a trial is scheduled for February. This case represents a rare example of a lawsuit by a scientist who alleges academic persecution for his religious faiths. Both sides allege that Dr. Gaskell was invited to the university in Lexington for a job interview. In his lawsuit, he says that at the end of the interview, Michael Cavagnero, the chairman of the physics and astronomy department, asked about his religious beliefs. Quote, Cavaniero stated that he had personally researched Gaskell's religious beliefs, unquote, the lawsuit says. According to Dr. Gaskell, the chairman said Dr. Gaskell's religious beliefs and his, quote, expression of them would be a matter of concern, unquote, to the dean. Federal law prohibits discrimination on basis of religion. For the plaintiff, the smoking gun is an email from department staff member Sally Schaefer to Dr. Cavaniero and another colleague. Mr. Schaefer wrote that she did an internet search and found links to his notes for a lecture that explores, among other topics, how the Bible could relate to contemporary astronomy. Quote, clearly this man is complex and likely fascinating to talk with, unquote, Ms. Schaefer wrote, but, quote, potentially evangelical. If we hire him, we should expect similar content to be posted on or directly linked from the department website, unquote. So here is actually really where the crux of the argument is, and we were talking to you earlier. This sounds an awful lot like the ClimateGate emails that were hacked and unearthed, where you have these sort of strangely contexted, candid, private conversations between two, and you take this and extrapolate this. And so, they're taking up his case as this might be it's a University of Kentucky is a publicly funded institution, and you do not want to do anything that's publicly funded, discriminating against someone because they hold a belief. But the kicker to this particular story is in email responses to questions. Let's see. He had a responsibility. So Dr. Cavaniero did not return phone calls for comment. Reached by, University spokesman said that the hiring committee, quote, had a responsibility to discuss his comments on evolution and science in general. Part of the job is lecturing publicly on science. And I think that's where the crux of the story goes, is that if he's going out there and has to represent the institution of science, and he's going to be in the position where he's going to have to talk about the age of the universe, or he's an astronomer, for God's sakes.
Yeah, I think that science has a tendency, all of our beliefs, all the things that we can prove through science mutually buttress each other, whether it's the age of the universe, which is something you'd see come up in geology, astronomy, biology. I think the thing that is a bit disconcerting to me is that this is somebody who has a bit of a record of when ideology and evidence come to a contradiction. I don't want to hire somebody, if I'm an employer at a place of learning, who, when those two things clash, doesn't take the side of science. I mean, there are people like, say, Ken Miller. Ken Miller is a devout Catholic. He's also a biologist. However, when it comes to these sort of contradictions, it's his religious beliefs that have to make the concession to evidence, that he's not going to simply say, oh, this is a lie because it says the world is this long, and the evidence points to that, therefore the evidence is a lie. Right. I think that's the concern there. And even though his problems with, say, evolution aren't necessarily part of his field, I wouldn't want to hire a scientist who was a biologist who thought that we were a geocentric universe, that the Earth was at the center and that the universe revolved around it. Sure. Because it basically says there that when those sort of contradictions happen, he's going to side with the ideology. And that's disconcerting, especially if tax dollars are paying for him to educate people. Yeah. And he's using this basically state-funded and state-run place of education to forward a specifically sectarian religious view.
Well, I think the crux of this relies wholly on the fact that if you think that they have a right to sort of preempt the entire thing by saying, well, there's a distinct possibility that given his behavior before, that he's actually going to do things in the name of our university that are inherently religiously partisan. The question is that sort of like a prior restraint sort of thing, which is like you can't try and convict someone for something they might do.
Well, he's not getting fired for it. He was still just an applicant. Right. And like, for instance, I've worked at bookstores before in the past, and one of the questions that I was asked working in retail was, is there anything in this store that you would refuse to sell a customer? And I said no. If somebody said yes, that's a question of their ideology getting in the way of their doing their job. Right. That is a problem. That is a problem that if there's somebody, they're both equally capable of doing the job, but one person's ideology gets in the way of them executing the job and the other person's doesn't, I'm going to hire the person who doesn't get in the way, because there are plenty of people with religious beliefs that can move past them for the point of the job.
Right. Well, so, we've got a caller now, Janine from Edmonds.
Hey, Janine, what have you got for us today?
Hi, guys.
Hey, how are you doing?
I'm okay. I want to thank you for your show. I've been tuning in the last few weeks or a couple months, and not regularly, but every once in a while. And I find your discussions intriguing.
Well, thank you.
Thanks.
What I would like to ask you, though, what do you say about people who have prescience or who have, you know, strong intuitions or who have visions?
Well, I guess my first instinct when I hear about that sort of thing isn't to immediately assume that there's a supernatural explanation. There is something, I know Libby has talked about it before, it's something called confirmation bias, that human beings, and that's one of the important things about science, is that you write every single thing down so that you can understand it, because from a perspective of us trying to do this individually, we're really, really bad at it. Like, for instance, if I have a horrible feeling that I'm going to get this phone call that my kid is in danger or something, and then I do, I forget all the times that I have that feeling and then nothing happens. That's why it's important to write it down, that human beings are really, really bad amateur statisticians, that we really have to do our work. I think that my initial reaction would be that I'd want to study this person under a controlled circumstance if they really felt that they had these sorts of abilities. Because if they did, I'd want to know about it. This would be huge. I don't really believe that people have these sorts of abilities because nobody's been able to, show these things under a controlled circumstance. And that
hasn't James Randi had $1 million prize out to anyone? I think Bill Bixby did this before him, but James Randi has had $1 million prize out for someone who could come in and actually prove that they had some sort of psychic powers, prescience, telekinesis, and so far no one's claimed to claim it. So $1 million is a pretty big incentive.
I think it's also important to mention, this is one thing Randy says all the time, is that he doesn't believe that most of the people who try to claim this are liars. That a lot of these people have, in a lot of ways, convinced themselves more than anyone else.
Yeah.
That usually when somebody, under controlled circumstances, where they actually test their abilities versus what they would expect from random chance, and people fail, usually the person behind is more shocked and disturbed and upset than anybody.
Sure.
So I mean, as somebody who is a giant sci-fi nerd, I love science fiction, I love comic books, I would love these sorts of things to be real. But the evidence just doesn't seem to bear it out.
I personally had a situation where I prayed for 4 hours one morning for something to change in my life, and at the end of the 4 hours, this voice, this brilliant bright light filled my room, and a voice that I knew was Jesus Christ said, "That's okay, Janine, we'll fix it." And it was fixed in that moment.
Well, it was fixed in that moment, but I think my initial thought behind that is I wouldn't be surprised if that was something internal, something innate within you, in the same sort of way that people feel that they hear these voices. And a lot of times it seems sort of indistinguishable from natural intuition, whether we call it conscience or, your brain talking to itself. I don't know what the situation was. I don't know what the problem you felt was solved. But based on just one person's testimony, it's not enough for me to believe it.
And I think, because I've heard this before, I think it's been said before, isn't it ironic that when people hear voices in their heads, it's always telling them what they want to hear. So I think you've kind of got to take a step back and think about if there was actually entities outside of yourself. I guess maybe some people who are schizophrenics hear voices that tell them bad things, I suppose.
Yeah.
But, that's, I'm not going to...
In fact, I've heard the voices tell me just the opposite of what I expected or was planning to do. So, I just feel...
Sorry, Janine.
I just feel that to say there are no angels, there's no Christ-like beings is a problem.
Well, it might be a problem with your experience, but it's not enough. It is not enough evidence for the rest of us who aren't you to take it on the word of your experience that we can never share. I mean, revelation is necessarily first person. There's no way that I could ever experience what you experience. So that's not for something to be testable, provable, and reproducible, and falsifiable also.
Well, I defend to my death your right to not believe.
Oh, we're glad about that. We're glad that you agree with us. It's just that for us, and really for anything to approach the area of truth, we've got to be able to put it in terms where other people can say, yeah, I can try to reproduce this and then see if it's true for us as well.
I think it's also worth mentioning just how easily fooled human senses are, that oftentimes we do get it wrong, and that's why it's important to sort of back up and did it. You said that you had this vision and you knew that it was Jesus Christ. People have visions like this in other religions all over the world and know that it's somebody else. Clearly, they can't all be true. And I think that often it's the same sort of thing with experiences people have where they believe they've been abducted by aliens. I think that we have a tendency to see in these sort of moments what we expect to see, and that the brain under certain trauma or certain stimuli are able to have these as many times astronauts in a, what's it called, a
hyperbaric chamber?
Well, just as clearly, why can't they all be true?
Well, because they contradict each other. If Jesus
Well,
says
so
he is the
what?
way and the light and he's the only way to heaven, and then the other person has an image from Lord Brahma, who's the creator, these things can't both be true at the same time because the mythology around them is generally exclusive, saying that only it is true.
Yeah, when they say there is there is only one God but God, and
Well,
Muhammad is his prophet.
I'm not trying to argue that Christianity is the final say on all this stuff. I think that the ascended beings are available for us in whatever context we can perceive them.
Well, I would like evidence for that.
Cultural lines.
I'd love to see evidence that these
Yeah,
things are
wouldn't
true.
it be nice if we could distill this into our type of science?
Well, why not?
That would be great.
Oh,
Everything that exists should be able to be distilled into a type of science where we can prove the accuracy and the truth of its existence.
Well,
Everything.
maybe someone will invent the science
No,
that
see,
will distill
this is the
it.
thing that I find really funny, is that in the tone I'm reading from you right now is a sense that you believe we're probably being arrogant now, but we're not the ones saying that we know more than all recorded science.
No, please don't read that into my tone.
Okay. I definitely felt it, though. I definitely felt like, oh, wouldn't it be great if,
Well,
if we could just...
that tone was not directed to you. It was directed to the world at large.
Okay.
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 But I'm sorry.
As I said, I appreciate the dialogues that you people give here.
Okay.
And,
Well, we appreciate your call.
I'm sorry that Scan has lost its TV.
Well, we are too.
I've fought hard. I'm still fighting to keep Scan on TV. I've written letters and I've made phone calls, and I'm still hoping that things can continue as they have been.
Well, it's good news for public access viewers that there will be some sort of transition plan. I'm sure you could keep updated on scantv.org, but the show won't be on it, unfortunately.
Yeah,
but thank you,
unfortunately.
Janine. Thanks so much for your call and for your perspective. We appreciate it. Thank you. Have a good day.
Yeah, I think this is one of those things where you hit this wall where there's a totally different standard of evidence between you and somebody else.
Right.
Where for me, evidence is demonstrable evidence, independently verifiable evidence is the only thing that really matters.
Right.
And clearly that isn't the case with Janine. That these sort of like you said, the first person revelations.
Right.
That's not enough for me because I've been wrong about things before, and it's a sense of humility where I admit, hey, I could be wrong. I'm not. If I have some sort of an experience like that, I don't want to immediately make the assumption that my initial reaction is right, and I want to know if I'm right or not. So I'm going to try to find out through somebody else, because if this is something real, it should be measurable in some way. It should be observable or made to manifest in some way.
Yeah, and I think we didn't have a good enough way to distill it, which is, if you basically just believed well, this is the problem about appealing to a supernatural to help you with something, right? She was saying, well, how is it not wrong if how is this wrong if everyone just has their own thing they can believe? Well, it's the sort of two sides of the football team praying to God. It's like, okay, well, every member of one side of the football team prays to God for them to win, and the other prays for them to win. How do you figure out? How does God determine who it should win?
How do you even make the determination that this prayer is having an effect either way?
Right. So that's the problem, is that you could easily contrive a situation where the thing that you're praying for 4 hours to get from this white light to be able to help you with is actually being prayed the opposite of that. Let's just say you're being prayed to, I don't know.
Sort of an ethereal tug of war with another.
Well, you're praying to win you're praying to win the lottery, and then someone else is praying equally as hard as you are to not win the lottery. That would be a situation in which you could cancel; those effects could cancel each other out. And it couldn't end, because the limits of your imagination of things you could wish for are all over the place. And if that actually were the case, and we did have access to that, there'd be a lot of strange things happening in the world.
Yeah, I guess
there really aren't.
There really aren't, and. Generally speaking, if you want to talk about distilling into our science, every mystery that has ever been solved has always turned out to be not magic. I've never seen once a scientific explanation being overturned in favor of a supernatural one. This has never happened. If it did, then the rules would change. Then suddenly, this whole project of science would suddenly be turned on its head. If suddenly there was a thing where the universe and its rules were not something that could be predicted.
Yeah, actually, when the first time Kate Fair called into the show, she was talking about magic, and I think the way I took it was she was saying, how do you distinguish between sort of the Clarkian, has an explanation, but we don't know what it is because it's
the illusion
complex,
of magic through technology,
and then things that actually just can't actually happen due to the natural laws of the universe. And as Hitchens puts it, so the supernatural is by definition a suspension of the natural order, and that's not possible. We've never found a case of which a phenomenon that we couldn't understand, we found out that it violates the rules of the natural order. No, we've just improved our understanding of what the natural order actually looks like.
If there's a way to manipulate that natural order, or through incantation or prayer or some sort of ritual or gesture, that would be the definition of magic. The idea that you can do something completely divorced from the typical rules of cause and effect. So we should probably get to our topic.
Well, that was a good diversion, though. It was a very good diversion.
It was. It was definitely a lot of fun. As something we talked about last week, we were talking about the so-called War on Christmas, which is that campaign that people like Bill O'Reilly and Bill Donahue and others waged to raise money and pump up ratings during the holiday season.
Yeah.
It's just this weird campaign. Atheists, among a lot of other groups, are basically accused of waging war on Christmas or trying to destroy it. If not atheists, then department stores. I find it really funny when they claim that department stores want to destroy the holiday, when department stores love Christmas. They love Christmas.
They want profit.
They love Christmas so much that they keep pushing it a little bit behind every year. Christmas, according to most major chain stores, starts the day after Halloween, and it continues there. You will actually find orange and black on one display table and red and green on the other.
I was going to say the Kroger grocery stores have Cadbury eggs already, so it's pretty awesome.
we got to start as early as possible. I mean, in the end, these people don't hate Christmas. They love it. If they could have Christmas all year with the sort of business they do from Christmas all year, they would, easily. So we don't hate Christmas either. Do you hate Christmas, Casey?
No, I don't. Not only do I not hate Christmas, but I think we were talking about this before, Mike. Unlike a lot of other people in the country, we are atheists, and we are in a social group of atheists. And by that stance, from someone who is in Middle America, we probably know a larger sample of people who are atheists. I don't know anyone who hates Christmas. I don't know anyone who refuses to celebrate Christmas, who thinks that it's all a conspiracy by Christians to enforce their religion. I don't know anyone who doesn't actually enjoy some of the more awesome parts about being with friends and family, feasting, having a lot of relaxation. I don't know anyone who doesn't like that. In fact, the only people that I know that refuse, and there are very few of them, that actually refuse to celebrate Christmas are just people who are lazy and don't want to buy other people presents. Cheap and lazy. That doesn't have anything to do with them being atheists or not.
I mean, sure, we will occasionally grumble about long lines and crowded stores and things like that, but we don't hate it. I mean, there's nothing that we grumble about that religious believers don't grumble about. In fact, I love Christmas. I love the lights. I love the food. I love being able to see my family, and almost being forced to have to spend time with them. I have no excuses that I can use, no errands that I have to run. Everything is closed. I just want to spend time with my family, eat better food than I eat all year.
Yeah.
And I love being able to see the looks on people's faces when I buy them something and they see the thought that went into it.
It's really cool. Actually, I'm betraying my answer to this question now, is that I actually had the first half of my Christmas last night, and in as much as it's kind of silly to spend so much money and having the obligation to do that, but when you actually find a present that people aren't expecting, even if it's not for kids are great, but for other adults, and for them to open it, not know what it is, and be like, oh my God, this was amazing. That's awesome. That's a great feeling.
That is such a great feeling. I love that, and I love that moment where clearly you have thought about this person and you can't wait to show them this.
Yeah.
I almost love giving presents more than I love receiving them. I said almost. But the truth is, I would wager that most of the people we're talking, we can't talk about all atheists. We can talk about ourselves and a lot of the people we know.
I was going to say, I already made that mistake with talking about Star Trek fans. So sorry, atheists, I won't do that again. I promise.
We could say we're people who live in a country that Christianity is sort of culturally dominant.
Yeah.
So Christmas is sort of the holiday that's sort of spread around. And I would say I would wager right now that we celebrate Christmas in much the same way everyone else does, with very, very little differences. For us, it's always been, I mean, I was raised against a kind of Catholic backdrop. You were raised sort of against Pentecostal.
Yeah.
So that sort of is there. I still celebrate Christmas, even though I don't believe in any of the supernatural or whatever holy or religious sectarian elements of it. But I can celebrate and put up pictures of Santa Claus without believing in him too, and I think most Christians can as well. I would say right off the bat that that Christmas is not only a secular holiday for us. I'm going to make a stand right now that it's a secular holiday for most of you as well, including most theists, without even really thinking about it. I mean, just as a culture, we tend to celebrate it as a largely secular winter holiday with colored lights, trees, wreaths, presents, great food, singing carols. Really, what does any of that have to do with Christianity? What does that have to do with the nativity scene? For me, even as a little kid, the Jesus part, even when I went to Catholic school, never really came into it. And it really doesn't even today. I will put out a challenge to any of you is just please, as a thought experiment, go out to the department store, even look around your house at the holiday lights and stuff you have up. Really ask yourself how much of it has anything to do with Christianity.
Right. And if you're someone who actually once has observed these things, let's take a spin around your living room, call us, 206-421-5658. Tell us about the way your family celebrates Christmas and whether or not if there actually is any religion injected into it. I mean, I wasn't a Catholic, so I know that what is they called, the C&E Catholics, the Christmas and Easter kind. They're the people who I think go out of tradition because they really only go to Mass twice a year.
Yeah, there's a lot of people nominally Catholic, and that's the 2 times that they go. And aside from that one moment, the rest of the holiday is pretty much secular.
Right.
I mean, even look at a lot of our Christmas traditions. Look at holiday specials and stuff like that. Most of these things really don't have a lot to do with. Look at A Christmas Carol. It's like the most famous Christmas story. Has really nothing to do with Christianity.
Yeah, I don't actually, it's been a while since I've read it. I don't think that any of the crazy supernatural stuff that ends up happening, I don't think they use the word Christ at all in the entire, well, they use Christmas, but I don't think they use the word Christ at all in that entire
I think just
story.
The only mention of any kind of religious moment is at the end, God bless us everyone.
Right.
It's just, that's the last line. The rest of it is basically a rich, horrible, greedy man getting harassed and trolled by ghosts into being nicer.
Right.
That's the story. Really, there's countless incarnations of A Christmas Carol. I think it's probably the most remade story ever, both on stage and, I mean, even Kermit the Frog to Ernest. I mean, everyone's done a version of this story.
Bill Murray, which is the best Christmas Carol adaptation ever, which is Scrooged. I'm going to try to make sure to watch it this year because it's that good.
Everyone from, Mickey Mouse to Fred Flintstone.
I just have to say, though, the reason why Scrooge is great is because the guy who's the Ghost of Christmas Future is the guy from the New York Dolls, the guy who used to dress up in drag, and then, what's his name? Johnny something or other?
I thought you were going to say Giuliani for a second.
No, Poindexter, what's his name? And then he did the feeling hot, hot, hot. He's that guy. That's the guy who's Ghost of Christmas Future.
In Scrooged?
In Scrooged, yeah.
Okay.
No,
So let's look at some of these other ones, like the Grinch. The Grinch has nothing to do with it. In fact, whether it's a Grinch, Ernest Saves Christmas, any of these, it has almost nothing to do with Christian mythology at all. Really what it comes down to is a much more modern interpretation of Christmas.
Sure.
Which is this struggle we have between the elements of fellowship, living with your families, eating good food, thinking of others,
charity.
Versus the charity,
Yeah.
versus the more commercial elements and the greed and the selfishness. That seems to be what it's really about. Is it usually a Christmas special involves the battle between those two things, not about the nativity. There are some. I will say there are some animated ones that do play into the Jesus story, but they are the minority. Really what we get down to is this holiday, the way it's celebrated in a very real cultural sense, is it's really more about Santa Claus and Bing Crosby than it is about Jesus and wise men.
Yeah. That like everything else in American culture is the cliche is that America is the melting pot. So it means many people from many places and many different ideas come together and sort of in this heterogeneous little ball that happens together that is America. I think what you see of American holidays is not the original, the sort of pilgrim narrative, sort of dejected Christian roots that came over from England. What you've actually seen about pretty much anything that had its root as any religion has now been bled dry, like Easter we've talked about before. It has to do with eggs. I don't know if there's no eggs in the resurrection story as far as I know.
And that's the thing I kind of noticed is that really what we get down to with a lot of these Christian holidays is that there's these two parallel narratives that happen at the same time. One of them largely comes from pagan cultures. When the Christians came basically into Northern Europe and started converting people, they found it was just a lot easier to convert people if they kept a lot of their traditions and just put Christian things. That's why a lot of the Earth Mother sort of narratives and stories and mythologies started taking on Virgin Mary, that sort of imagery.
Right.
It's still the mother sort of image. But the holidays even more so because these things are completely unrelated. Where if you look at Easter, you have, not only do you have the hunt for eggs and the Easter bunny leaving you chocolates, but then you also basically have this story about, completely unrelated story, first century Palestinian Jew being murdered brutally, and he did it for you. Now, the same thing with Santa Claus versus Jesus. If you're a child, which one of these is more fun, and which one of these is a kid, even Christian kids cling on to? One of them just doesn't lay a guilt trip on you, and one of them is just naturally fun. The same thing with sort of the Santa narrative. That's why you have Christmas songs like Jingle Bells, Deck the Halls, Winter Wonderland, Here Comes Santa Claus. Nothing to do with Christianity, but I think a lot of it is that the reason that it's spread out and sort of, I wouldn't say watered down, I'd say, like you said, it's sort of melted into the rest of the culture, is that it's fun and that people want to participate in it, that we want to share this sort of stuff, that we don't want to make it sort of sectarian or exclusionary. And then this stuff is just sort of, in a weird sort of way, Christmas is a non-denominational holiday.
Yeah, I mean, I think people have argued before that, oh, well, making Christmas a national holiday is tantamount to the government, respecting a given religion, which is meaning Christianity, hence Christ is in the name of Christmas. But I argue, well, first and foremost, from a more practical perspective, I think we should have about 3 times as many federal holidays in this country to get people days off than we actually already do.
Or time and a half.
Yeah, well, yeah.
That would be great.
And I wouldn't even matter if, if it was Saturnalia or Zardoz or whoever holiday, Mithras, whoever holiday you want to put on there.
He gave us the gift of steel.
I could care less who it was. I'm glad to have holidays. And so personally, I'm not going to detract you for loving Christmas. I'm not even going to detract you if the reason why you love Christmas is because you love Jesus Christ. I'm just going to say, you guys don't have a monopoly on celebrating the holidays, and you also are not the ones who get to say, this is what the holiday should be and this is what it shouldn't be. And
just as you don't have the right to tell us that, we don't have the right to tell you. You can go ahead, celebrate it any way you like. We actually just got an email. This is from Jen, talking a bit about this. It said, if you had a child, how would you explain your beliefs to them when they are young? What would you do about holidays? Would you simply tell your child to not celebrate Christmas and move along? If you did celebrate in a non-secular way, would you bring Santa into it? How would you handle things that are pervasive in our, quote, Christian culture? Neither of us have children, but I would say that I would probably celebrate Christmas, but the Jesus stuff wouldn't come into it. I think how I would explain, if I had a kid, as I would explain that there are a lot of people who believe all sorts of different things in the world. I don't see any reason to believe that any of these things are true, but that I would stress to the kid that they should explore these things for themselves and find out. But I would not necessarily push atheism on them, but I would teach them to be a skeptic. I would have them understand that a lot of times people say things that aren't true because they want them to be true, and that it's important to have evidence for the things that you believe and reasons. And then somebody says something that seems like a really, really big claim, that they should have a lot of really good evidence to back it up. That's what I would teach a kid, and let them come to their own conclusions on that.
Yeah, I mean, my opinion about this is pretty floating, which is that it would be hard for me to imagine about intentionally lying, because I mean, obviously, there's a point in time when your child comes to know that you're not perfect. They think that you're God. They think that everything you do is perfect and believe everything you say. Eventually, you get to a point where they understand that you are flawed, just like every other human being. And my problem has been, and I don't know how I would take this, is that I personally wouldn't want to lie to them. Like, I wouldn't want to say something that I know would be a lie, perpetuate it, only to later for them to think, why is it that he was saying that this was the case, even though it isn't? Maybe the
and
fallout
you're relating this to Santa?
Yeah, to Santa specifically. So maybe the fallout for this, for Santa, yes. Fallout for this may not be all that traumatic for most people. I just don't know. I mean, some people might think of it as a good sort of test for your skeptical abilities of a kid. But I think you're going to find that there's a divergence of opinion on atheists on this also.
Yeah, I think it's kind of funny. The only people I've seen who are really visceral in their hatred of Santa Claus and not teaching Santa Claus this are usually fundamentalist Christians, whether it's chick tracts or people like Fred Phelps, who actively think that if you tell a child that Santa's real, they find out that he's not real, that they're just going to find out that God isn't real either.
Well,
I think it's kind of funny because there really is an ongoing debate among atheist parents about how to handle the Santa question.
Sure.
I'm of sort of two minds. I don't have kids, so I haven't been forced to sort of make this decision. I think I would be torn between either telling them that Santa's just a game, that it's fun to pretend, and that it's fun to play this little game so we pretend that Santa's real in the same way that they can play a game where they can pretend to be Luke Skywalker or Batman or something. And that's just fun, or a princess. That it's fun. It's fun to play pretend.
Hey, girls can pretend to be Luke Skywalkers too.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely. Or Princess Leia or Zardoz. Always a fun game.
The gun is good, the penis is evil.
Exactly.
I'm sure you want your 4-year-old daughter chanting that, I'm sure.
So, yeah. You'll get a call from school from that. But I think that it's fun and important that it's fun to play and it's fun to use your imagination, and that's probably how either I'd approach it that way, or there's a lot of atheists, and this could have its thing too, is that you use Santa Claus as a vehicle to teach skepticism, because kids figure out for themselves that Santa isn't real over time, and it's usually the thing that holds them back is the same thing that holds them back about God or Jesus, is they're afraid of these rewards going away. They're afraid of getting ostracized by other kids, and actually in a weird sort of way it happens the other way. They stop believing for fear of ostracizing too, but they don't want the present train to stop.
Yeah.
And they're afraid
Yeah,
that if
I was
they
going to
don't,
say, I don't know how many kids have actually got a lump of coal in their stockings in the past 60 years, but probably not many.
Not many at all. I doubt that it's
Not
been
many.
done. I think that Santa Claus is always, he serves in a lot of ways the same purpose that Jesus does, but without a, throw you into a dungeon to be tortured in fire forever kind of way.
Yeah.
We're just a lump of coal, which is still a valuable...
Still pretty good. I mean, a lump of coal is like...
It's a valuable resource.
You get a warm night on a cold winter evenings.
Yeah, you can...
Unless you're in Australia.
Like Bob Cratchit, you can just hunt
Actually, probably coal is probably a pretty shitty present if you're in Australia.
Yeah.
Because you're like, what am I going to do with this? It's like 78 degrees outside.
Santa's clearly in the pocket of the coal lobby. So
Santa approves mountaintop mining. He does. Blow that... I'll keep...
You can't say that word. Yes. But yeah, I think, how would you approach Santa if you had kids?
I don't know. I'm still stuck. Like I said, I wouldn't want to lie. I don't know. It's just me. I wouldn't want to lie.
I think I'd probably go with he's not real but pretend, but I'd probably bring them in on what is largely a conspiracy. If you notice, there is sort of a Santa Claus conspiracy. It's not a harmful conspiracy. Nobody's getting rich off of it except for maybe Toys R Us, but this sort of belief where everyone is sort of in on this lie, that you lie.
Sorry, I just got that. I totally just got that. There is a conspiracy.
There is a conspiracy, which is that people are essentially, they will lie for the sake of other people's children.
Sure.
If like, say for instance, a little kid in front of their parent asks you about something about Santa Claus, even though we don't believe this stuff, there's this weird sort of cultural pull to lie on behalf of that kid's parent. And like, oh yeah, and even the news media is in on this, where they'll say stuff like, oh well, on our Doppler radar we see Santa Claus and his sleigh, but if he's moving really that fast, they wouldn't be able to spot him on the radar, or they would have mistaken for a missile and he'd kick off World War III.
There was a great webcomic that was that showed the. It was like showed the real Santa Claus, and he was just like this like middle-aged guy. He didn't have a beard. He just kind of had like this brown stubble. He had like a full head of hair, and he was like, he totally had some hottie on his arm, and he's getting a reservation. He's like, Mr. Claus, and he's like, you aren't the real, the Mater G's, you aren't the real Santa Claus, and he's like, yep, I'm the real Santa Claus. And then he asks him, so how do you get presents to all the kids in the world? He goes, I cheat. I just bypass all the poor houses. Yeah, sorry. Santa Claus the dick.
Santa Claus is such a dick. I mean, seriously, when you really come down to the Santa Claus myth, this is, again, us playing nerd here, but I would give up presents to children if it meant that he could deliver poor people food. I would take that in a second.
Sure.
So, yeah, but again, it's this weird sort of thing where we want to sort of protect kids in this lie and let them sort of figure it out for themselves, and then when they grow up, they get in on the conspiracy too.
Sure.
I don't know. I don't think I would lie to my kids, I think I would make it. I would Santa Claus as a metaphor, but it's just a fun game to pretend. I think that's what I would do, and I wouldn't encourage them to go make other children at school cry or anything.
The earliest I can remember about this is being over at someone. It couldn't have been Nintendo. It had to have been something that wasn't Nintendo. I think it was Star Wars toys, and saying, "Did your mom get you that for Christmas?" And then he said, shocked, he said, "No, Santa got it for me." And that was actually the one point that I don't think my parents cared about Santa stuff. That was the one point that I realized that there were actually other kids that like got told it and who actually believed it. And I was like, oh, what am I gonna do? You know, like I shouldn't have done that. I just irreparable damage. So I don't think I ever believed in it. So for me, maybe it's not. I didn't have the extra joy that
you didn't feel the need to go into like a Yuletide James Randi there and totally bust that crap.
The world you know is fake. Cry, little kid. No.
That is a plot of about 90% of the shows on Scan.
Yeah, as atheists, we're not actually doing that. So the crazy fundamentalists who want to paint us as being who wants to rob joy and hope away from the all of the sincere believers, that's not actually what we want to do. We actually just want you to relax and have a good time.
Exactly. I do find it kind of funny though. This would be the
Christmas is a lot like anal sex. It's better if you just relax and enjoy it.
Use plenty of lubricant this Christmas. So the thing that I find kind of unusual too is that we're in a weird position, probably more than anyone else, as far as if we had kids, and not us together. But if we had children and we had to teach them about Santa Claus and things like that, we're actually in our free time on a TV show telling people that all this stuff isn't true.
Right.
Would we be playing special pleading with our kids saying, oh, well, Chupacabra and Jesus and Krishna, that stuff's all fake, but Santa Claus, that one is real.
Sure. Well, we got to go. We're going to be at the Ram. You can have our final wrap party up on North Seattle at 4:30. That's the Ram at Northgate if you want to see us. So we're getting down to the hilt here. Mike, by God, it's been a pleasure. By someone else's God, it's been a pleasure, sir. Thank you for the time, and thank you to everyone else who's out there. We'll see you next week. Actually, no, we'll be on next week. We'll be on the day after Christmas. So after you're fat on your Christmas hams and you're wearing your Christmas sweaters, turn on Scan because we're going to have a pre-recorded show on the 26th. So we won't be live. Don't call in. But that'll be our last show on Scan, but please tune in.
Yes, and if you want to reach us, you can still reach our voicemail, 206-420-0997. Thank you, and we hope we'll see you soon.
Merry Christmas, everybody.